We are doing a webinar today all about automation in design systems. Before we get too far into it, I wanted to do a few housekeeping items. The first of which is to your right, you'll see a chat box. Feel free to ask any questions throughout the webinar if you want to introduce yourself. Certainly, if you want to share information about how you're using automation in your design system, all of that would be absolutely excellent. And we'd love to have a pretty robust conversation as we go through the webinar. The other thing that we kind of pride ourselves on here is that I think we have the absolute best community of design system practitioners. So we always say, don't be a jerk, but I have never met a jerk associated in the community. So hopefully that continues to be the case today, which would be absolutely awesome. So I suppose the next thing that we'll do is we will introduce ourselves. In just a second, I hope that David Darns, who is the newest member of the Zero Height team and is our developer advocate, will rejoin the webinar. It might be a couple of technical difficulties there, but hopefully we get it figured out here in the beginning stages of the webinar versus getting a little bit further in. My name is Neff. I'm on the product marketing team here at Zero Height and have the opportunity to shout about all of the cool things that we are releasing, including some of the things that we're going to get an opportunity to talk about during this webinar. And I'm also joined by Nick Allen, who is the product manager, or one of the product managers here at Zero Height. The team that he is on has made some really cool things that you all might utilize, like our Storybook integration, our brand new GitLab integration, and then also our Zapier integration as well, all of which we'll have an opportunity to talk about just a bit during our time together. All right, so before we sort of got here live in front of you, the three of us hopped on a call and had a conversation about what automation is. It seems to be something that we talk about quite a bit and is at the forefront of our vocabulary here in design systems and quite frankly in any industry. And what we arrived on so that we have a collective definition of what automation is that automation is really just a predefined workflow. It says, hey, when this thing happens, then this other thing should follow. And I don't necessarily have to make sure that the thing that follows actually happens. It sort of happens by magic, right? So I think in life and in design systems, we want to automate so that we can take shortcuts and so that we can keep things in sync. Inevitably, if I had to manually make the second thing happen every time the first thing happened, I might forget sometimes. I might find the process to be a little bit tedious. So when it is possible to automate, then it makes my life a lot easier as a human. And it certainly makes the work that we do as design system practitioners a lot more consistent and a lot easier to maintain. So when it comes to automating design systems, there are a few ways that we have sort of teased out as being some of the most popular ways that automation sort of comes up. It might be that you're trying to connect your design and your development tool. So maybe designers are using a tool like Figma, and you also have your documentation tool like Zero Height, we hope. How do you connect those two things? It probably is better if it's automated and you don't have to think about that every single time. How do you keep design and development tools in sync? Like, for example, Figma and GitHub or Figma and Storybook. How do you keep everyone informed about your design system so that folks know, hey, something new has happened? And how do you work faster with access to more information so that maintaining and creating a design system is not incredibly laborious and tedious work? So we're going to kind of go through some of these different ways in which automation might be a part of a design system. But the first one that we want to talk about is this one that I think is like very high on folks' list. How do you work faster and how does automation allow you to do that? I'm going to pass it over to Nick, who worked on our AI features here at Zero Height, to give us a little bit of an idea about how we conceptualize automation in the AI space and some best practices for how folks who are working on design systems might be able to utilize it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Neff, and hi, everyone. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about how we use AI at Zero Height. This is obviously a huge topic, and we could do entire webinars on this, so I'm going to keep it fairly high level. Just to, I guess, say we're fairly early in our journey with AI at Zero Height. We're deliberately like balancing, I guess, adopting these new technologies and the opportunities they present with the very like legitimate privacy and ethical concerns that comes with AI. But I think the probably the easiest way to show what I'm talking about is to maybe do a live demo. And hope that this works. Please, everyone, cross your fingers when it comes to live demos. It should all be fine, but who knows? Yeah, I guess our like philosophy with AI at Zero Height is that we, at least to begin with, we want it to do the kind of laborious, maybe heavy lifting tasks that are relatively generic and shared across lots of design system sites. So there's a lot of patterns within design system documentation sites. I'm sure you're pretty used to these. What I'm going to show here is how we can use our AI assistant to help you write something like an introductory paragraph for a component. So I'm going to say, write a short intro for a button component. Now it's going to go off to use OpenAI when using GPT 4.0 model, so like the latest model from OpenAI, and that's going to bring that back straight away. We do a little bit of magic behind the scenes to tell it that this is for design system documentation. So we give it a few extra kind of refining prompts, and then the response that comes back should be appropriate for design system documentation. You can see here, it's brought back a quick paragraph giving an introduction to a button. And then I think typically we would recommend best practices, obviously review the stuff, check it's accurate, check it's relevant to your organization and your documentation site. And then from there, you can kind of adapt it to however you want it. Or if you're happy with it, just move on and keep going. And I think our philosophy is that if you're doing this with, say, hundreds of components and you're having to fill up lots of documentation pages, AI can just make that so much easier to get started and get it to a point where, especially for teams starting out, if you've got nothing, you can get it to a pretty comprehensive, fleshed out documentation site, hopefully within minutes or days rather than weeks or months. So yeah, Neff, that's a bit of an overview of like our approach to AI at the moment. And yeah, hopefully a quick demonstration of how it can help save time.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the things that I'm pulling out of the demo that you just did is that when we think about automation in design systems, it might be that we are automating these tasks that we do over and over and over again, and don't require a whole lot of headspace. So if you can get OpenAI to write the introduction to a button component, for example, now your team maybe has time to think about patterns, or maybe has time to think about how you're going to name design tokens, and so on and so forth. So I think automation is really cool because of what it allows humans to then be able to do. So I suppose one of the other things is, let's say now you've documented the start of lots of different components, but inevitably you probably want to bring in some information from your design tools, whether that be Figma, Sketch, XD, or whatever it is that you're using, so that designers who visit the design system site know what the latest component is, and developers have all of the information from the design tool to be able to recreate it in code in the way that it should look. Dave, newest member of the team, but putting you on the spot here, can you talk a little bit about what automation looks like for folks who are trying to keep their documentation tool, which is hopefully Zero Height, in sync with their design tool?
Thank you. Yeah. Hi, folks. Sorry about the technical issues prior. Yeah. So I think this is one of the like fundamental shining points of Zero Height, as I've seen from many like customers and people on the team, is that being able to directly wire up your design tools like Figma or Sketch. I'm a personal fan of Sketch, but I know there's a lot of people that are using Figma every day to manage their design system. Um, and you can wire that directly to Zero Height in order to keep your design system in sync and automatically in sync with your design source material. So I'm going to do a demo as well. And I mean, you can cross as much as you like if you want, like Nick said about keeping keeping it lucky. But I think we'll be pretty good here. So I'm just going to share my screen. We'll share this screen over here. So you'll be seeing now, this is a hypothetical design system called Air Orange. And this is the button component page. And you'll see that despite the design system being called Air Orange, this button appears to be green in the design system. So that doesn't look right. Not only that, the contrast ratio isn't very good. I think we need to fix that. So let's switch on over to Figma. Here's all our design system components that we've designed up all nice. And I think I can see over in this corner a button that is green, and that does not look right. So let's fix that. We'll just change the color over here to our enabled orange color. That looks about right. So now what we can do is go back over to Zero Height and use the update Figma files option up here in the top right. We'll click this, and what that's going to do is going to go through all of the Figma files that are wired up to Zero Height and check for any updates and changes. And in a few moments, you'll see the button update to the current version of that. And then what we can do is deploy that and share that amongst the team and show that the button has been fixed. There it is. So you can do that across the whole of the design system that's stored in Zero Height. So I think that's kind of a good demonstration of not only like automation, but also the element of using your favorite design tools and your favorite tools that you like to work in. Because I know designers and developers love to work in their particular tools, while at the same time being able to automate that process into the tools that work best for the appropriate use case.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the alternative, if automation in this instance didn't exist, then you would make a change in Figma. You would perhaps download that from Figma, then you would upload it into Zero Height. And all of these steps would then exist. And I think eventually, as humans, or maybe speaking for myself, the more steps it takes to do something, the less likely it is done with fidelity. So I think that automation is also this really cool opportunity to keep us all honest, and to ensure that we're doing the things that we need to do in order for the information in our design system sites to be accurate and up to date. So, Dave, I know you did a really good job of sort of talking through what automation looks like on the design side of the house, right? So you got that beautifully designed button. Now it's over in Zero Height, along with documentation that you might have generated from a spot like ChatGPT, also through automation. But that isn't quite complete yet. You also want to include content from from developers that might be like code or docs that might exist in those particular sites. Nick, can you speak to what it looks like to include developer content in Zero Height through automation?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's been a really big focus of us at Zero Height for quite a while on how we can get developers more involved in design systems on Zero Height. So from experience of talking to like hundreds of customers, the most successful design systems and design system sites are the ones where you've got buy-in.
Nick, I think we might be missing your audio, unfortunately.
Okay, cool. Can you hear me now?
We
Okay.
absolutely can.
Yeah, sorry about this, guys. But cool. So this is back in the button page from this demo. And I'm going to show, yeah, I guess the equivalent side of like from the development side, how you would bring that in. So everything is in one place. So consumers of a design system can go to a single place to get information about maybe usage guidelines about the button. They can see designs, and then they can also see code. So I'm starting with a blank page here. What I'm going to demo first is our storybook block. So much like how Dave demoed the integration with our design tools, we have a pretty tight integration with Storybook, and this is very popular with developers who are using Zero Height. What I've done here is I've already connected up Zero Height's Storybook instance with my design system site here. That's done by like a simple link. You just drop a link in, connect it all up, make sure everything is you have access to it. And then from there, it loads all of the stories from Storybook. So I can either search for this modal, or I can drill down, just find a button. For this example, I'm going to use the button with controls. I'm going to show what that's like to bring that in. So from here, you've got the live component that's brought in, that's in a kind of a mini iframe. And then everything else is rendered natively on the page, which is much better for things like accessibility and also just performance. You don't have kind of multiple iframe windows and double scroll bars and things like that. Here you'll see you've got all the controls that come with Storybook. But you also have the code as well. So this code can be shown directly alongside the components. This is pulling automatically from Storybook's code add-on. So it's leveraging the automation capabilities of other tools and then bringing them into Zero Height. Like, we're very conscious that we're one tool in an ecosystem of tools. We're definitely not going to try and do everything ourselves. But if we can play really nicely with the tools that people are already using, that's the best chance we have for success and giving all of our customers and our users successful design system sites. So yeah, that's a kind of very quick tour of how, like, an easy way to get code in, and that will stay in sync with Storybook. You can also manage versions if you want. But yeah, that will stay in sync, so any changes to Storybook will automatically be reflected here. Now I'm going to jump over to another page and show how you can get a different type of information into Zero Height. So for this, I'm going to show off our synced Markdown block. Now, this is really popular for syncing existing Markdown files that exist in the Git repository. So Neff mentioned earlier that we just released GitLab integration. So we now support GitHub and GitLab as our kind of linked repo tools. I'm going to bring in this changelog Markdown file that exists in my test GitLab repo. And what this does here, it goes off to GitLab, grabs this material, brings it back, renders it on the page, again, natively within Zero Height. So for viewers of your documentation site, they would see this and it would appear exactly like existing Zero Height content. So they wouldn't be aware of where, like, the source is for this. This is really popular for things like changelogs, also for API docs and READMEs. There is, similarly to the design uploads pattern, there is an option here to update sync Markdown across your entire style guide. And I think the benefit for this, and a lot of the theory that went into when we were building this, was allowing developers to work where they already work and use the tools that they already use and the tools they already love. So from speaking to a lot of developers, they're very accustomed to writing documentation in Markdown in their code editor, storing it in their Git repository, and then with this, we allow you to continue to work in that way, but still surface the information in the same place as all your design documentation. And you can do everything else that you can expect from Zero Height alongside this. So if I wanted to add in other blocks alongside this, I could do that. I can add any kind of content type around this. And this, I guess, yeah, another example of where we're trying to, like, bring everything together into a single place. So the consumers of the design system have a single destination to go to get all their answers. And yeah, hopefully that gives a good overview of a couple of different ways of getting different types of information from the engineering side into Zero Height.
Yeah, it totally does. And I think the point that is really cool here is that it's merging things together that would not have normally been seen together, right? So you can imagine a typical product team might use Figma. They might also use GitHub. They might also use Storybook. And all of these things have disparate information in 3 different places. Now you finally, through automation, have a single place where folks can find the relevant information from all of those different sources. Thanks so much for that, Nick. And I think that even beyond that, there are other ways that we've thought about folks bringing in both code and design, and that's through design tokens. And in my opinion, perhaps outside of what we're building soon, which we'll get an opportunity to talk about, I think this is one of the coolest places for automation within Zero Height. And I think also one of the places that is ripe for opportunity of automation throughout the entire design system community. So Nick, I guess I'll put it back on you for a second. Can you talk a little bit about how design tokens work in Zero Height and what that automation looks like? I think there's also lots to be learned for folks who maybe aren't using Zero Height, but are thinking about how tokens might move between tools as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And unsurprisingly, I'm going to do another live demo. So yeah, I'm going to show off. This is something we worked on a little while ago and have continued to iterate on since. Like, we couldn't do a webinar on automation without talking about design tokens. So within Zero Height, we have a top level section for tokens. This allows teams to bring in their design tokens from a number of different sources. I'll actually show you those here. Yeah, so you can bring these in from a number of different sources, whether your design tokens already live in code. So if you have a JSON file stored in GitHub or in GitLab, then you can bring that in and you can sync that. If your design tokens live in, or the source of truth for those is your design tool, you can also bring those in. And so we have an option here for bringing in Figma styles and converting those into tokens. We also have support for Figma variables, which is actually using a plugin. So there's a few technical reasons why we had to go down the plugin route for that rather than bringing it in via the existing REST API. But you can also bring it in from a JSON import as well. So the idea is behind this, and we're following the W3C spec for design tokens. So the idea behind this is like, no matter where your tokens exist, if you can get them out into that standard format, you should be able to then get them into zero height. For this example, I'm going to show off the link with GitLab just because this is so new. And here I have a demo token file that already exists in GitLab. I'm going to sync this, bring this in. You can see I can bring in every type of token. So here I've got colors, I've got animation, duration, sizes, all sorts of things. Once that's inside zero height, they will live in your token manager now. So all these tokens exist here. They can then be documented in your style guides or design system sites, as you'd expect. But you can also do other things within this section of the product. So you can make changes to these tokens right here. So if say if there were design colleagues who wanted to make changes using a kind of visual UI, they can make changes to say this token here using a nice color picker. Let's completely change it. And then from there, that change can then be published to the style guide, so automatically updated. But those changes can also be pushed out to other places. So you can, it's a two-way sync with our Git repositories, so you can push that back out to GitLab or GitHub. You can also download the JSONs using other tools. And there's also an option for a style dictionary export, which I'll talk about in just a second. I'll actually hand over to Dave for some of the technical details there. But the idea here is that we have a place for tokens to live. You can bring them in from all your sources, and then you can send them out to other places based on what you need. And I think that's quite a nice chance for me to segue and hand over to Dave to explain how our style dictionary export works. I'll continue sharing my screen and just show this in the background.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, this feature is actually more powerful than what it might seem. Like, it says style dictionary export, but actually has the ability to export to abundance of different platforms. So being a front-end developer at heart, I am quite a fan of CSS. And so by selecting the CSS option that Nick's just selected there, that URL will actually provide folks with a CSS file. And that CSS file will contain all your variables that have been pulled into zero height as usable variables inside of your CSS. So say you're working on the marketing website and you need the colors and the fonts and the sizing and the spacing that are all living in, theoretically, they could be in Figma, they could be in GitHub, they could be in GitLab, they could be anywhere, and they could be sucked through into zero height, and then zero height will provide this URL, and then that goes back out to your development like environment, and then you can start using those variables immediately. And that's the same for an iOS application. Even that's the same for an Android application. That's the same for, like, if you just want a JSON object with all that data in it. There's a lot of options in here, and I've written an article actually. Neff's just shared the article in the corner there. That shows how to use those variables in a CSS context, shall we say, like using CSS custom properties, which is like a very powerful feature of CSS to stuck these colors through and other variables like from your design tokens into your project and start using them on the live website, or make them as part of your release cycle or release or deployment process, shall we say. It's a very powerful feature. You should check it out. Oh, I think you're muted, Neff.
I totally am. Yeah, a super powerful feature, I think. I think for me, what is really cool is regardless of where tokens might be sort of at their most official, you've got a way to automate what delivery looks like. So if tokens are in Figma, you can sort of start there and have tokens start in Figma and eventually make their way into code. Maybe they start in GitHub or start in GitLab, and you want to make some changes over in zero height where it's democratized and folks don't have to know how to code to be able to make changes to those tokens, and then eventually make their way back over there. But you've got a really cool way to be able to, one, include more people in the design tokens pipeline, and also to make sure that the information across all of the tools is correct, and what is reflected in your code base is always going to be what is reflected in the design system, and something that you all can be pretty proud of. So I think we talked quite a bit throughout the webinar about creating a design system and incorporating information from lots of different places through automation. But if you sort of get to the end of that, right, you've created this amazing design system. It has information from Figma, information from Storybook, information from GitHub, and design tokens are absolutely beautiful. The next step, or at least the next logical step that I would think, is that you want to get that design system site over to where people can actually view it and utilize it in their workflows. And I think this is where our integration with Zapier is really, really cool and offers lots of options for folks to be able to keep people informed regardless of where people are looking for information. Dave, I'll pass it back to you to talk a little bit about Zapier, and I think you might even have a live demo for us.
Yeah, we're going hard on the demos in this webinar. We're going full tilt. So yeah, hold on to your screen shares. Sorry. So yeah, I think Nick kind of alluded to this a little bit prior, and the same with Neff is that um, what we can now do is kind of close the loop on this management process. So we've been bringing stuff in from various resources, Figma, GitHub, GitLab. Um, manual imports. Now we're kind of sending it back out to our applications. But then what do we want to do about closing that feedback process? Like, how do we report back to like the development team about changes and updates to the design system in Zero Height? So if I share my screen again, I can show you, share this screen here. So we somewhat recently introduced Zapier integration into Zero Height, and that means that when I say Zapier integration, I actually mean integration with an abundance of different tools that are available to designers, developers, project managers, and all of that kind of stuff. So you can see here we've got integration with Notion, GitHub, Gmail, Google Sheets, everything and anything, and that really opens the doors to like all sorts of like integrations and options and stuff like that. And us ourselves at Zero Height kind of experimented with this Zapier integration when it first got introduced. And what we did is we created a series of pre-built Zapier zaps, as they're called inside of Zapier, that allow you to kind of get up and running quite quickly with integrations that we think you'll find very useful. So the one that we created here is create a GitHub issue for every new Zero Height style guide release. So when you create a release in Zero Height, what that will do is it will create a brand new issue inside of your GitHub repo to let your development team know about new changes to the design system. So I'm going to demonstrate that right now. So if I flip over to, this is actually my personal website. So I have it stored on GitHub. I have it as like a kind of small like static site. And you'll see here, this is my issues panel. I like to keep the issues quite low, but what we're going to do is try and automate the way that we get a notification from my design system to notify the development team of a new release of the design system. So if I switch windows here to this other view, and you'll see here is my design system. It's very simple. It's got all my tokens in here, and I've got some other stuff going on in the sidebar there. But I've made a bunch of changes now to this design system. I made some token changes and a bunch of other things. And I want to let the development team know that I've made some changes. So let's create a new release. And I'm going to call this release version 0. Let's say version 0.1.0. And what I can do is I put a bunch of like release notes in there, but I'm just going to keep it really simple and confirm that release. And what that's going to do is it's going to ping over to Zapier, and then Zapier is going to format that and ping that over to GitHub. And if we come back over here and refresh, you'll see that there's a brand new issue here to let the development team know that there's a brand new release of the design system. And for demonstration purposes, I've just put like the timestamp of the new release and a link over to the design system itself, with hopefully like release notes and stuff like that. But as you can see in this kind of very simplified demo, that we can close the loop between the feedback process. So we've kind of come full circle now, and we're letting the development team know that the design system has been updated. There are new changes. Let's go ahead and make some changes to the development side of the project.
I think that demo sort of follows the theme that we've been talking about throughout the webinar, in that folks have established workflows. And one of the coolest ways that we can use automation is to insert the design system into those established workflows, right? So if developers are going to look at issues in GitHub, instead of fighting them tooth and nail to say, hey, please come over to Zero Height to check to see if we have a brand new version, we can say, no, 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 no. We're going to put that information where we know that you're already looking. And there are opportunities to do that outside of GitHub as well. If folks are looking on Microsoft Teams or Slack, we have native integrations, or you can make them even more robust by creating your own workflow in Zapier. If you work at a company that uses lots of email, and that's the way that people learn about information. I know Dave alluded to there being an integration with Gmail and Outlook through Zapier as well. So I think this creates a really, really cool opportunity for you to think about the places where folks are already getting information and then giving them more information about the design system in those places. I'll also add, Dave, that the integration that we have with Zapier is also bi-directional, right? So what you showed is something happens in Zero Height and then something else happens in another tool. In this instance, it was GitHub. But the opposite could be true, right? Like something happens in GitHub and then a page status in Zero Height is updated, so that your design system team, who might be using Zero Height every single day, has access to that information without having to go on to that other tool, which I think is really cool in both ways that it might work. All right. So we kind of got to this place where we are talking about going from creating a design system from scratch with AI all the way to you have this design system that is really cool and you are getting information out about it. And I think that that is a pretty good articulation of where Zero Height is when it comes to automation today. But as Nick spoke about, automation is sort of at the cornerstone of what we plan to do in the next few months or so and what you might expect to see out of Zero Height. I'll put Nick on the hot seat one last time to sort of talk through what we're currently exploring and some things that are in experimentation.
Yeah, thanks, Neff. So yes, this is really exciting. This is what I spend the vast majority of my time doing is looking into obviously new things that we can do where we can deliver more value for developers in Zero Height. I mean, all of these things are fairly early stage, and we're experimenting with them at the moment, but we're pretty excited about all of these options. The first one is around trying to do something that's a little bit different to what we currently do with documentation, which is around scanning packages and code repos to analyze for design system adoption. So for this, we're trying to help developers monitor, I guess, like how much the design system being used, how effective it is. And we're also trying to take away some of the, I guess, some of the heavy lifting or some of the manual work that a lot of design system teams share with us around keeping, like, just managing the design system. One of those things is like keeping packages up to date. So we know a lot of teams are using packages to distribute the design system. We speak to a lot of developers, and one of the things they say, like a frequent thing, is they spend a lot of time trying to get people to update to the latest version and keep up to date. That seems like that's an inefficient use of their time. So we're looking at ways we may be able to help that and solve some of those problems. Next up, we're looking at tightening our integration with storybooks. This is really exciting. We're obviously like big fans of Storybook at Zero Height, and we believe, yeah, there's more opportunities to be had by tightening that integration. Some of the things we're looking at there is where we can automate even more. So maybe you might imagine a situation where a new component gets built in Storybook. Potentially that might be able to trigger the creation of a new page in Zero Height for your documentation site, and potentially like auto-fill that with the Storybook story. And then the third one is something we've been looking at for quite a while. I remember I've been at Zero Height for approximately 3 years now, and I think my first week we talked about this. For teams not using Storybook, we do have a live code block, which allows you to like bring in code, render that live inside Zero Height. You can do things like add your dependencies. So if you've got public or private npm packages, you can add those, and we can use those to render the code live. But one of the challenges with this is keeping that code in sync with the code base and the source code. Right now, there isn't a live sync between those two. But that is something that we are interested in trying to tackle and trying to solve that problem. I think Nev's going to share a link to a page where it gives a little bit more information about some of the things we're looking at. But yeah, this is a really exciting topic for us at Zero Height right now. A number of product teams are looking at this stuff. We are on the lookout for early testers, people to interview, people to learn more about their setups, people to potentially even give early access to for alpha and beta versions. So yeah, if you are interested, if any of these things appeal to you, please do go to that link, fill out that form, and then yeah, one of the product teams will probably be in touch to pester you, to ask you some questions, and then yeah, potentially give you early access to some of this stuff. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of some of the things we're looking at, some of the things we're thinking about, and yeah, some of the things to maybe look forward to later this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully, we'll be able to host some of you all on a future webinar where we unveil all of the cool things that we have been able to accomplish, particularly for developers. The other thing that I'll throw out there is I think for folks who maybe are a little bit worried, hey, I'm not a developer on a design system, is this for me? It might be worth still going through that page and looking at some of the things that we're looking at to see if maybe someone on your team or maybe even you might be the person that we're looking for. So would absolutely love for folks to learn a little bit more about what automation will look like in the future and some of the cool things that it will make possible for monitoring your design system and creating design systems that are in sync. We'll stick around for just a couple more seconds in case anybody has any questions about automation features that currently exist in Zero Height or any that we are looking to build in the future. But otherwise, it was absolutely awesome to go through a series of live demos and also to have like sort of a conversation about what automation and design systems look like. To close this out, I'll ask Dave and Nick one last question, and that is one that I hope is an easy one. If you were somebody on a design system who is looking to start using automation, where would you start? And Dave, we'll go to you first.
Oh, so I'm very excited about like the possibility of new features inside of Zero Height that lean into developer experience improvements, and I would love to see. I would love to be like a first time user of like Zero Height with those features, and whether you know I'm very keen to like help people unfold a design system, a style guide from scratch, using automation tools. So, creating those pages, creating those demos, all these kind of automation processes that kind of allow all of that design system work, whether that be like components or token creation, really like shine and sing together as like one like harmonious like website. I've been on the thick end of the workflow, shall we say, of like building the whole thing myself, and it is very rewarding. But it's a lot of overhead. There's a lot of work there. So I'm very keen to see the other end of that spectrum where you're a new person and you need to like build out a style guide or your design system website from scratch, and you have the tooling or you have the work behind you, but you want to unfold a website from that. So that's I don't think I answered your question, but that's what I'm excited about. That's what I'm hyped about.
We'll take it, Dave. You can answer the question that you created. And Nick, I suppose you can answer the question that I asked, or you can ask a question of yourself and answer that one. That's okay as well.
Nice. Yeah, I'll do my best. I think I got to give the product manager a response, which is someone who is surrounded by people who can code and can design, and I can't do either. I think I would lean on Zapier. So I think Zapier is a really interesting and powerful tool. I've used it personally. I do use it personally to manage a lot of my own kind of like personal productivity workflows. So I'm syncing up tools I use day to day. I've used it professionally in this company, the previous company I worked at, and even going back before that. So I've got like a lot of years experience with it. I think for someone who doesn't code, it can open up a whole world of automation. I think there's Julian posted a really good point in the chat that like Zapier is key, but we need more triggers and actions to make it even better. And I totally agree. I think we're at the start of our journey with Zapier. the more stuff we can add to it, and the kind of more complex workflows you can build off the back of that, you can really start to unlock magic. And I guess that's what I would suggest to people is like, yeah, don't be afraid of it, get stuck in. I know it can be a little bit maybe overwhelming or daunting if you haven't used a tool like that before, but once you get over that kind of, it's a short learning curve, then it is super powerful, and you can kind of create all these custom workflows and hopefully take away some of the pain that we hear a lot of teams suffer with, which is, I don't know, pains around like communication and keeping everybody on the same page, stuff like that. Zapier is so good for. So yeah, I would encourage that.
Amazing. Thanks, y'all, for sharing tons of insight. And special thank you for trudging through lots of live demos. I know those can be scary in a webinar, but really excited that we got an opportunity to show how things actually work in Zero Height, and to have real discussions about how folks might be able to automate in their design systems. So whether you're using Zero Height right now, or maybe just stuck, we're here for a discussion about how to use automation and design systems in general. Really, really glad that you joined us, and hope to see you at a future webinar. I think that's it for us, and thank you again for joining. We'll send over more information via email, so keep an eye out for that along with the webinar recording.